Today we're visiting Llech y Drybedd. This impressive Cromlech stands unmarked and overlooked on a hillside only a mile from the coast. A public footpath follows a private track up to the monument, but there's no parking on this track and no laybys nearby, so you can either use the public car park in Moyle Grove, about 1.5 miles away, or like us, you can try and get well out of the way on a soft verge. This is one of the last dolmens that we had left to visit on our recent tour of Pembrokeshire, and we were lucky enough to catch it on a sunny day, giving us spectacular views of the Preseli Hills and the coastline. Like a lot of dolmens that we've filmed recently, the old public footpath running by is recorded on old maps and referenced as a well-used route through the ages, linking what were once important hubs of trade and pilgrimage. Just a few miles away, and far better known, are Pembrokeshire and Nevin, full of their own folklore and legends. There's a lovely little video about Nevin and the Bleeding Ewe on our channel, and we'll soon have a longer video of Pembrokeshire where we will look into the connections between these sites and the research being done around the world. So please do subscribe to get notified about that. Coflein describes the site as a freestanding megalithic chamber, with earthfast stones supporting a substantial capstone. No traces of a mound are mentioned. Whilst looking through old books for any information on this ancient megalith and its associated folklore and legends, we found that like many other Cromlechs, this one's name has had many different mutations over the years. So while there could be some legends linked to this site, perhaps they've been lost to the world of linguistic mutations, mistranslations, and the general renaming of things. But the one reference we did find gave it high praise and describes it as one of the best in Pembrokeshire. In a historical tour through Pembrokeshire, Mr. Fenton visits the site and uses a picture drawn by Sir Richard Hoare for the front page of his book. The following is a quote from the book. "I call on my friend John Evans Esquire of Glasdeer, and in company with him and a guest of his, the Reverend Mr. Owen, who was then on a visit to his native country after an absence of 21 years, a ride to Llech y Drybedd, one of the most perfect for that species of druidical relics called Cromlech we have in the country. It is supported on 3 upright stones of no great height. There was another stone, as is frequently seen, but not in contact, overturned. The incumbent stone is not as flat as usual, being of an immense bulk and about 40 feet in circumference, nearly round, and its mean thickness from 3 to 4 feet. The stone is of a very peculiar kind, being of a bluish colour, very hard, yet yielding a little to an edged tool. The southeast side of the stone being superficially marked all over with the initials of names for these 200 years, and one corner worn down into a perfect hone by the shepherds. Mr. Evans, my cicerone, who is the proprietor of this venerable relic, with a zeal which does him honour, takes great pains to preserve it. At the west end of the field, in which it stands towards the sea, I pass a stone called Llech y Drybedd, or the Stone of 3 Heirs, the possession of 3 different men having met there." So Fenton describes old graffiti engraved in the capstone, and it's still visible on some parts. But a photo on Coflein shows much larger and more numerous markings, covering an entire face of the stone, which have thankfully faded with time. The photo is undated, but we can at least assume it's between 60 to 100 years old, as the photographer who took it, W.A. Call, lived between 1878 and 1965. Although defacing a piece of history is obviously not something to be condoned, there is something interesting about seeing graffiti from 2 centuries ago. Aged by weather and the creeping lichen, I often find myself trying to age the growth by its interaction with the dated carvings, generally with little success. The lower parts of the uprights have been worn smooth from years of grazing animals rubbing against them, and cattle had clearly been using the site recently. There's a large crack in one of the supporting stones, with 2 rivet heads either side that could be used to measure the movement between the 2 sides of the split. And of course the question is this going to affect the long-term stability of the monument? And should there have been, or should there be, a fence to protect it from the cows and farm machinery? Fences are certainly common at other sites, and reasonably popular as long as they're specifically to stop animals rather than human visitors. The idea of cows leaning on and churning up the ground around an already damaged stone seemed like a recipe for a quick collapse, but I've gone back through posts on the megalithic portal and found a picture from 2002 that shows the crack, and it's in quite a similar state, with the rivets just looking a little shinier. While this goes to show that nothing much has changed in the last 20 years, it doesn't guarantee its future, so who knows how long until the cracked stone gives way and this beautiful Cromlech falls to ruin. In a historical tour through Pembrokeshire, a book we've now quoted quite a few times on the channel, the writer described many ancient sites of interest in Pembrokeshire as being in the process of excavation by the landowner, or sites being outright demolished and their stones being used for walls or other structures. Many of the sites he talks about are now sadly nowhere to be seen today, but we have found some of them on old maps. Very close to Llech y Drybedd is Trelefant, the remains of another dolmen. This one, already fallen to ruin, has a capstone with around 75 cut marks on it. We mentioned some possible but undocumented cut marks on the hanging stone in a recent video, and it's been interesting to read the mixed opinions in the comments section across social media. But while the legitimacy of the cut marks on the hanging stone remain definitely in question, this site is comparatively well documented, has been filmed by a Korean team looking at cut marks around the world, and has been excavated and studied by archaeologist George Nash. There's a great 25-minute video over on Current Archaeology, where George Nash describes his experience researching the site, so rather than repeat what he says, please find a link to the video in the description.